turnaround. You are to let out a shout, and the horns are supposed to blast, and the Lord's going to do the great and mighty thing. What happens? The walls fall down. But in that process, two things Joshua lets the people know of. And those two things are this. One, you are to take Rahab, go in, grab Rahab, and everyone who is under her household, bring her out. So they send an extraction team, bring her out, she's safe and sound. And the third thing that Joshua tells them is that everything is to be destroyed. You are not to get any of the plunder, none of it. You're not to take any of it. And if you look at chapter 6, except for Rahab the harlot, she is to live, she and everyone in her house with her, because she has hidden the agents we sent. And as for you, watch yourself in the city under a holy curse. Be careful that you do not covet anything in it and take something that is cursed, endangering the camp of Israel with the curse and making trouble for everyone. All silver, all gold, all vessels of bronze and iron are holy to God. We're going to put them in God's treasury. So that's like a first fruits tithe right there. It's to go to God. So chapter 7. And I love how chapter 7 starts. Do you remember how some of the old TV shows in the 80s, like one of the shows I'm thinking of is tonight on Murder, She Wrote. They kind of give you a preview of what's going to happen. Well, that's what he's doing right here in the first verse of chapter 7. Then the people of Israel violated the holy curse. Achan, which rhymes with bacon, son of Carmel, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of the cursed things. God became angry with the people of Israel. The fact that it starts with that gives you a pretty good red flag that something is up and something's about to go down that doesn't go in Israel's favor. But there's something that you should know. The name Achan, that rhymes with bacon, the name itself means one who brings trouble. So not only are you seeing a preview of what's going to happen, his name has already been ordained to bring trouble to the tribe of Israel. So that's what we see here. And the name Zerah, if you remember back in the book of Genesis, Judah and Tamar, Zerah is the second son, is the twin of Perez. Perez was the line that the Messiah would come through, and Zerah was the second boy. So there's a little bit of a genealogy right there for you, and that's free of charge right there. Okay, so we go to chapter 7, verse 2. Joshua sent some men from Jericho to Ai, and Ai means heap of ruins, which is near Beth Aven, which right there was, I think, it had something to do with, it wasn't a very nice name. I can't remember what it was. I'm sorry about that. But just east of Bethel, he instructed them, go up and spy out the land. The men went up and spied out the land of Ai. They returned to Joshua and reported, don't bother sending a lot of people. 2,000 or 3,000 men are enough to defeat Ai. Don't wear out the whole army. There aren't that many people there. And right here, this is kind of what boggles me. Joshua's a general. Joshua's a warrior. He's had years of experience fighting under Moses. He's had years of experience. He just had the victory of Jericho. And these guys come back, and I don't see that they reported anything. All they did is said, look, just send this many people. We should be able to take them. There's no report in there. He doesn't say, well, what's the terrain like? How high are the walls? How thick are the walls? How many people? What are a few people? He doesn't ask any questions, which kind of like boggles your mind here. But he also doesn't do one other thing. He doesn't consult the Lord after he's just received this report. So 3,000 men went up, and they fled in defeat before the men of Ai. The men of Ai killed about 36. And they were lucky. It was only 36 out of 3,000. Chased them from the city gate as far as the quarries, killing them at the descent. The heart of the people sank, all spirit knocked out of them. Now remember back in chapter 5, we heard that the people were in fear of Israel. Their hearts sank because why? God was about to do amazing things for Israel. And now what would he have here? The tables have turned. The Israelites are now in the same position. Now they know what it's like to have the shoe on the other foot. Okay, they have the spirit knocked out of them. Joshua ripped his clothes, fell on his face to the ground before the ark of God. He and the leaders throwing dirt on their heads and prostrate until evening. He goes before the Lord after he's been humbled. Not before, but after. And Joshua said, oh. Now remember, he's whining, okay? Master God, why did you insist of bringing these people across the Jordan? To make us victims of the Amorites? To wipe us out? Does this sound familiar? Do you remember how many years Joshua and Moses had to put up with the Israelites? Oh, why did you take us out of Egypt? Oh, if you just left us there. Oh, if you just let us, eat onions, leeks, and whatever. This sounds familiar. And this time it's the leader of Israel actually doing it this time. Why didn't you just let us settle down on the east side of the Jordan? Oh, Master, what can I say after this? After Israel has been run off by its enemies. When the Canaanites and all the others living here get wind of this, they'll gang up on us and make short work of us. And then how will you keep up your reputation? This is also very sly, if you notice how Joshua does, because Moses does the same thing. He does it several times where Moses intervenes for the Israelites when the Lord's ready to destroy them. And he intervenes and says, no, but what about your reputation? What about you? It isn't so much us, but Lord, what about you? You said you would make us a great nation. You said that you would get us across. He reminds the Lord of this. And then God said to Joshua, get up. Why are you groveling? That would have been me. I would have said, get up. Quit your belly aching. Notice that aching right there? Notice my play on words? Okay. Israel has sinned. They have broken the covenant I commanded them. They have taken forbidden plunder, stolen and covered up the theft, hoarding it up with their own stuff. The people of Israel can no longer look their enemies in the eye. They themselves are plunder. I can't continue with you if you don't get rid of the cursed things. What is the Lord saying? I cannot take you any further until you get rid of this, until you sort it out. I'm not going to go any further. The victory, those 3,000 men, by rights, should have been able to take Ai. Had Joshua consulted the Lord, I believe he would have been able to take with the 3,000. Would have been simple, but he forgets to consult the Lord. So get started. Purify the people. Tell them, get ready for tomorrow by purifying yourself. Make yourselves holy. For this is what God, the God of Israel, says. There are cursed things in this camp. You won't be able to face your enemies until you've gotten rid of these cursed things. First thing in the morning, you will be called upon by tribes. The tribe God names will come up by clan by clan. And the clan God names will come, each clan will come up family by family. And the family God names, each man by man. So during this time, Achan, rhymes with bacon, has several opportunities to come forth. He's got plenty of opportunities to come forth and maybe just take Joshua on the side and say, Joshua, I messed up here. This is what I did. But he doesn't. What does he do? He tries to hide it. Okay, and so man by man, the person found with the accursed things will be burned, he and everything he has, because he broke God's covenant and did this despicable thing in Israel. And Joshua is very, very quick. He doesn't let any grass grow under his feet here. Joshua's up at the crack of dawn. Pretty much everything Joshua did was at the crack of dawn. And he called Israel tribe by tribe. And now how they did this was either by lots or by the ephah, the unum, and the thummim. they debate and how it was actually done, but whether it doesn't matter, but God was the one basically orchestrating the whole thing. So they're able to call out who's responsible. Okay? So the tribe of Judah was singled out. So all the other tribes are probably saying, it's not us. I mean, how did they do it? I mean, is it the tribe of Levi? No. Is it the tribe of Reuben? No. Is it the tribe of Simeon? No. Is it the tribe of Judah? Yes. So everyone else backs away. Here comes the tribe of Judah, which is the biggest tribe. And the way they were set their marching orders, that Judah would go first. Just like in everything else, Judah would go first. So Judah is brought forth. And then he called them up by clans, and they singled out the Zerahites. And all the other clans are probably saying, just like they did with the tribes, it's not us. Phew. But this is being done in front of everybody. What Achan has done in darkness is being brought out in front of everybody. So he called up the Zerahite families and singled out the Zabdi family. He called up the family members one by one. And so it's usually the men, because the men are the ones who went in and plundered everything. So one by one, the men were called out. And only one man was singled out. Achan, the son of Carmel, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, from the tribe of Judah. And interesting to note about the tribe of Judah, one way or another, the enemy is trying to wipe out that tribe. Why? What's going to come from that tribe? The line from the tribe of Judah. He's going to find one way or another to try to wipe out that entire tribe. But God actually shows mercy here, at least I think, because he could have wiped out everybody. That's what his heart was to do, because he was so angry. He could have wiped out the whole congregation of Israel, but he just narrows it down to one man. Joshua spoke to Achan, "My son, give glory to God, the God of Israel. Make your confession to him. Tell me what you did, and don't keep anything back." You know what's interesting there is that Achan can't back out. Joshua's probably being very sly about it and saying, it doesn't matter what you say. You've just been singled out by God. So just as well confess right now. Just do everyone a favor and just confess. And so he does. Achan answered Joshua, "It's true. I sinned against God, the God of Israel. This is how I did it. In the plunder, I spotted a beautiful Shinar robe, which was from the southern part of Babylon. And that's the first time you'll hear Babylon mentioned, which years down the road, Babylon at the time isn't much of a powerhouse. Okay, but what happens later on? They're taken into captivity to where? Babylon. So it's almost like a precursor, a little preview of what's going to be happening. He takes the beautiful robe, 200 shekels of silver, a 50 shekel bar of gold, which is about a pound, and I coveted it and took them. I saw it with my eyes. I lusted after it. I wanted it. I went after it. They are buried in my tent with the silver at the bottom. Okay, Achan's being the guilty party, he not only violated the divine ban, but he did it with the full knowledge of what he was doing. Did with the full knowledge and pretty much almost in a way thumbing his nose at God. But not only doing it with the full knowledge, but he attempted to escape prosecution by concealing the evidence. That's why he kept it buried under his tent, the robe, the silver, and everything. Because I often wonder if he was going to take the robe out for like a smoking jacket or something, why, just keep it in the tent around, his wife and kids, and not go outside the tent, because somebody probably would have noticed it and said, "I know where that came from." Okay, this was considered despicable to the Lord, and it called for a severe punishment. Joshua sent off the messengers. They ran to the tent, and there it was, buried in the tent with the silver at the bottom. They took the stuff from the tent and brought it to Joshua and all the people of Israel, and they basically spread it out in front of the Lord, in front of everyone. Joshua took Achan, son of Zerah, took the silver, the robe, the gold bar, sons, daughters, his ox, donkey, sheep, tent, everything connected with him. All Israel was there. And they led them off to this valley, which they would call the valley of Achor, which means troubled valley. Joshua said, "Why have you troubled us?" It's in his name already, so it's just been manifested in the physical. "Why have you troubled us? God will now trouble you today." And all of Israel stoned him. They burned him with fire and stoned him with stones. They piled a huge pile of stones over him. It's still there. Only then did God turn from his hot anger. That's how the place came to be called Trouble Valley right up into the present time. Now notice that we talked about Rahab. Her act of righteousness, because of her act of righteousness, her and her entire family gets saved. And she gets into the line of the Masonic line. Achan's sin does what? Gets his whole entire family destroyed. Do you notice how they parallel each other, but with different, one good result and one a very bad result? What was God saying? Look, I told you not to do this, and you did it anyways. And the fact that they only destroyed this one family when God's anger was to destroy the whole nation of Israel. Okay? So, is it a harsh punishment? Yeah, it is. But it could have been far worse. So we go to chapter 8. God said to Joshua, "Don't be timid, and don't so much as hesitate. Take all of your soldiers with you. Go back to Ai. I have turned the king of Ai over to you, his people, his city, his land." Now, I'm thankful that Joshua wasn't too hesitant, because after suffering, you're going from the thrill of victory with Jericho coming down and taking everything there to the agony of defeat by being defeated by what they considered a small nation. Okay? So Joshua, thankfully, reminding himself of the Lord, be strong and courageous. So once again, here we go. Do to Ai and its king what you did to Jericho and its king. Only this time you may plunder its stuff and cattle to your heart's content. This time they're allowed to. I sometimes wonder if there might have been some hesitancy from somebody saying, "Is that really true? Really, this time we can take this?" Because there had to be a little more fear of the Lord now. Okay? Most definitely had to be. And he gives Joshua a little bit of a hint here, right after he says, "Take the cattle and everything to your heart's content. Set an ambush behind the city." Okay, this time, the Lord gives them the strategy. Whereas, like, just early in the chapter 7, where the strategy came from who? It came from man. And God wasn't even consulted. But this time, Joshua was like, "Okay, I've learned my lesson here." At least you hope he learns his lesson. Joshua and all his soldiers got ready to march on Ai. Joshua chose 30,000 men. He went from 3,000 in chapter 7 to 30,000 men. Okay, this time he's going with overwhelming forces. And this time he's not going to underestimate the enemy, and he's not going to get overconfident in himself. He's going to be confident in the Lord. He gets to 30,000 men, tough, seasoned warfighters, and sent them off at night with these orders. "Pay me all your attention now. Lie in ambush behind the city. Get as close as you can. Stay alert. I and the troops with me will approach the city head on." In other words, they're going to come out in full view of Ai. When they come out to meet us, just as they did before, we'll turn and run. We're going to feign retreat. They will come after us, leaving the city. As we are running off and running, they'll say, "Ha ha, they're running away," just like they did the first time. That's your signal to spring from your ambush and take the city. God, your God, will hand it to you on a platter. Once you have the city, burn it down. God says it, you do it, Go to it. I have given you your orders. It's very explicit this time, and he's very detailed about it this time. So there's no doubt that this time it's going to work. Why? Because this time the instruction has come from the Lord himself. Joshua set them off, and they set their ambush and waited between Bethel and Ai, just west of Ai. Joshua spent the night with the people. Once again, here we go. Joshua was up early in the morning. Once again, he likes to do everything crack of dawn. Mustered his army. He and the leaders of Israel led the troops to Ai. The whole army, fighting men, all marched right up within sight of the city and set camp on the north side of Ai. There was a valley between them and Ai. He had taken about 5,000 men and put them in the ambush where they put them behind Ai, between Bethel and Ai, west of the city. They were all deployed, the main army to the north of the city and the ambush to the west. Joshua spent the night in the valley. So it happened that the king of Ai saw all this. The men of the city lost no time. They were out there at the crack of dawn to join Israel in battle. The king and his troops at the field en route to Arabah. The king did not know of the ambush set against him behind the city. Why? Because they think they're going to do again what they did before. So they're being lured into a false sense of security and a false sense of victory. Joshua and all of Israel let themselves be chased. And you can imagine the excitement here. I mean, I'm just getting excited just thinking about it. It's like, come on, follow us, come on. I mean, I just get so thrilled to even read this part because they're just like, come on, just follow us. Everybody in the city was called to the chase. They pursued Joshua and were led away from the city. There wasn't a soul left in Ai or Bethel who wasn't out there chasing after Israel, all the fighting men. The city was left empty and undefended as they were chasing Israel down. Then God spoke to Joshua, "Stretch out the javelin in your hand toward Ai. I am giving it to you." Do you remember when Moses would have to hold his hand out and Josh was out there fighting? And when Moses kept his hand up, Israel won. When his hand started going down, they started losing. So this is like one of those times where Joshua this time is given the opportunity to do the same. So Joshua stretched out the javelin in his hand toward Ai, and at the signal, the men in the ambush sprang to their feet, ran to the city, took it, and quickly had it up in flames. The men of Ai look back, and they're like, "Oh, snap, we're in trouble." I'm pretty sure that's probably not what they said, but anyways, they saw the city going up in smoke. They found themselves trapped with nowhere to run. Why? Because you got the ambush guys coming out this way, and you've got Joshua who's about to do an about-face and chase them down. The army on the run toward the wilderness did an about-face. Joshua and all of Israel, seeing that the ambush had taken the city, saw it going up in smoke, turned and attacked the men of Ai. So the men of Ai are boxed in. There's no way to go. There's no place to go. The men in the ambush poured out of the city. The men of Ai were caught in the middle, and with the Israelites on both sides. It was a real massacre. Not a single survivor, except for the king of Ai. They took him alive and brought him to Joshua. When it was all over, Israel had killed everyone in Ai, whether in the fields or in the wilderness, where they had chased them. When the killing was complete, the Israelites returned to Ai and completed the devastation. The death toll that day came to 12,000 men and women, everyone in Ai. Joshua did not lower his outstretched javelin until the sacred destruction of Ai and its people was completed. He was going to finish this. And he was not going to leave anything unturned here. Israel did get to take the livestock and the loot left in the city. God's instruction to Joshua allowed for that. So they were allowed to take the loot this time. They were allowed to take the plunder this time, and there was no stopping it this time. Joshua burned Ai to the ground, a heap of nothing forever. And that's what Ai is actually called, a heap of ruins. In no place. Go see for yourself. He hanged the king of Ai from a tree. At evening, and at that evening, the sun going down, Joshua ordered the corpse to be cut down. They dumped it in the entrance to the city and piled it high with stones. You can see as you go there. Okay, so the destruction of Ai is now complete. Okay, God's plans came to fruition because in chapter 7 you saw man's plan. They didn't consult God. The 3,000 original soldiers should have been able to take it, but because they didn't consult the Lord, because sin had taken place, they weren't able to take that victory. They ended up being defeated. And so in chapter 8, what do we see? Joshua, they dealt with the sin. They got rid of the troublemaker, Achan, that rhymed with bacon, who was quaking in his sandals because he'd been found out. Okay? So you see that they deal with the sin right off. They don't prolong it. And so we continue on with chapter 8. Then Joshua built an altar to God of Israel on Mount Ebal. He built it with the following instructions of Moses, the servant of God, to the people of Israel, as written in the book of Revelation of Moses. An altar of stone, of whole stones, that hadn't been chiseled or shaped by an iron tool. In other words, these stones were chiseled out by God himself. Nobody did any work on them. On it, they were offered to God the whole burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings. He also wrote out the copy of the Revelation of Moses on the stones. He wrote it with the people of Israel looking on. All of Israel was there, the foreigners, citizens alike, with their elders, officers, judges, standing on opposite sides of the Ark of the Covenant, facing the Levite priests who carry God's covenant. Half of the people stood with their backs to Mount Gerizim, and the other half on Mount Ebal, to bless the people of Israel, just as Moses, the servant of God, had instructed. Now, that instruction that Moses had given Joshua was in the book of Deuteronomy. And let me read a little bit about that for you, to give you a little background. Because Mount Gerizim would actually come up several other times in the Word of God. One other time that Mount Gerizim would come up was when Gideon and the sons of Gideon, and there's a mountain at which the sons of Gideon fight to take over that part of Gilgal. And another time where that mountain is also mentioned is when Jesus is talking to the Samaritan woman. When she talks about the mountain that we worship on and the mountains the Jews worship on, it's Mount Gerizim that it's mentioned. So it's always pretty fun to find these little things and how God uses these things. So, as I said, in the book of Deuteronomy 27, verse 11, And Moses commanded the people on the same day, saying, These shall stand on Mount Gerizim to bless the people when you have crossed over the Jordan. He's basically telling, once you cross over, this is what you guys are going to do. He's prophesied it. He's already spoken it ahead. Okay, what they did is that they split the 12 tribes in half. They took the tribes of Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Joseph, and Benjamin, and put them over on that mountain, Mount Gerizim. And Mount Ebal, so Mount Gerizim was to bless the people, and Mount Ebal was to curse the people. Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Naphtali. And the Levites shall speak with a loud voice. So you got the two mountains, okay? They're in a valley, which kind of creates a natural amphitheater, okay? So you got the Levites who are speaking out in a loud voice to say to all the men, "Cursed is the one who makes a carved or molded image in abomination to the Lord with the hands of craftsmanship and sets up in secret." And all the people would answer and say, "Amen." So they would say things like, "Cursed is the one who treats mother and father with contempt." And all the people would say, "Amen." So that's what the point of the mountain, those mountains were for, and the reason why that Moses had spoken it in, had prophesied. This is what you're going to do. You're going to set a memorial to God. And you're going to have half the tribes over here, half the tribes over here, and the Levites are going to speak it out, and you're going to have either blessings or cursings. And they also did the same with the blessings, which is in chapter 27, 1 through 26, where you got the, blessed are you, you're going in, you're coming out, which is actually chapter 28, sorry. Okay, so that's what the mountains were set up for. And, of course, they had to cross what? The Jordan to even get there. Moses spoke it, prophesied that this would happen, but what happened with Moses? What was he not allowed to do? He was not allowed to go in the promised land. He can stand up on the highest mountain and see it. That was about as close he was going to get to it, but he wasn't allowed to go into it. So he told Joshua and the people, when you cross over, this is what you're going to do. You're going to set up a memorial, and you're going to speak the blessings. You're going to go over the book of the 5 books of Moses and speak it out. And the people are going to hear you, and they're going to be in agreement with you, which ends up being very bad for Israel, because what's one of the first things they do? They keep breaking covenant. After that, he read out everything written in the revelation of the book of Moses, the blessings, the curse, everything in the book of the revelation of Moses. There wasn't a word of all that Moses had commanded that Joshua did not read to the entire congregation, men, women, children, foreigners, everyone who'd been on that journey. So that right there ends the conquest of Ai. It took 2 times for them to do it. Why? Because the first time, they didn't consult the Lord. But what happened? There was sin first. Had they consulted the Lord, they would have found the sin out a lot sooner and probably would have had the victory. And chapter 8 would be a totally different chapter. What happens? Joshua gets the idea something's wrong. Because why? They just had their butts handed to them. They shouldn't have. That was their first defeat. I mean, they went from the thrill of victory in Jericho, agony of defeat. And Joshua, of course, knows how to humble himself, of course, after the fact, but at least he humbled himself and sought the Lord and to find out why it happened. Why did it happen? Because a great, grave sin was set against the Lord, and the Lord's anger. He meant to really destroy the entire nation. But God in his mercy only singles out the man who does it by going by tribe, by clan, by family, man by man. And he only destroys that one family when he could have easily done it. Why? Because just like Moses, Joshua intervenes and says, what about your great name? What about your reputation? It's not so much our reputation, Lord, but what about your reputation? So he goes before. He's learned a lot from Moses. He's had 40 years to learn this. He's been in the presence of God. He's been in the presence of Moses, who, honestly, I would have gone crazy having to listen to the Israelites moan and complain every single time. I mean, they were constant peak and valley, peak and valley, peak and valley. They had their ups and their downs. Constantly complaining. Complaining alone would have just set me right off. And no wonder poor Moses couldn't get across, because he got mad one day, hit the rock twice that he wasn't supposed to do. Water came gushing out, and the Lord said, you're not going in. Can you imagine being that close to your victory and not being able to go in because of your disobedience and your anger? That right there is a prophetic sign that what we have to do is that keep that in check and go before the Lord, whether it's something big, whether it's something small. Are we going to make mistakes? Unfortunately, yes, we are. We're human. But the thing is to seek God's counsel and seek people who are godly, okay, who aren't going to tell you, well, the world says do this. God's usually plans are so a little unorthodox. It was in the book, in the 6th chapter. What does he tell them to do? You're going to march around six days in a row, one time around. On the last day, you're going to march 7 times around. And your enemies are looking at you like, what's wrong with you people? You're marching around 7 times. You're carrying an ark before everybody. You've got horns, and you're not doing anything with them. Into that 7th time that they do that, unorthodox, but it was God's plan, and it was perfect. So many experts will say, well, an earthquake happened at that time. Well, the timing of it's pretty good when you think about it, that it happened right at the same time, okay? God's plans are a little crazy. We would consider crazy, but they work, okay? They're not crazy if they work. That's one thing I have learned about being in the military, and I've had to say that quite a bit, is that the plan's not crazy if it works, okay? It's not crazy if it works. But Joshua learns, and he's trying to do his best to take these people across. He gets them across, and now the job is to take all these other kings and kingdoms and destroy them so they can have some peace. But Joshua, good man that he is, he's got a lot of work ahead of him. Why? Because he's still dealing with what? A sin nature, a fallen people who fluctuate, vacillate. That's a word that you like to use every now and then. Vacillate between being righteous and being unrighteous. And they end up paying heavy price for it. So that right there is Joshua 7 and 8. Next time, if she asks me to do it, we'll go on to 9 and 10 and the next conquest that he does. But this has been fun doing the Joshua thing because you just see the excitement, at least I do, of how God just takes this man who's waited 40 years to come into his promised land. And he uses him in a mighty way. And so much so that a lot of military leaders will look at some of the battles that Joshua, the modern day military leaders will look at a lot of the battles that Joshua fought. And they see with such brilliance, okay? But one of the things I hope they do is that they see that, okay, I didn't consult the Lord here, I better do it here, okay, this time. And that's what I pray over our military leaders, that they consult the Lord. And so that, my friends, is how we'll end it tonight. I wish you all a good night. Everybody out in YouTube land, thank you very much. And